Palm Springs, California, March 14th, 1962. The evening air was warm, the kind of desert night where conversations happened in low voices and deals were made over cognac. A soft breeze moved through the palm trees lining Thunderbird Heights. Inside a private estate at the end of a cul-de-sac, a small gathering was taking place. Not a party, not a business meeting, something in between, the kind of event where powerful men showed up because not showing up would be noticed. The house was impressive without being ostentatious. Mid-century modern architecture with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the San Jacinto Mountains. Inside, leather furniture in deep browns, abstract art, a teak bar along one wall, bottles arranged with precision. Everything suggested control, wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Frank Sinatra was there because the host had extended an invitation 3 times. The first had been casual, a phone call suggesting it might be nice if Frank stopped by for drinks. The second had been more direct, a formal invitation delivered by courier. The third had come through someone Sinatra respected, who said it would be appreciated if Frank made an appearance. That was the word, appreciated. The host was Carlo Marchetti, a businessman from Chicago with interests in construction, labor unions, and several legitimate operations. He had built hotels in Las Vegas, owned restaurants in Miami, and had the kind of connections that made city permits appear overnight and labor disputes disappear just as quickly. He was known for throwing lavish charity events, for being photographed with politicians and celebrities, for running businesses that, on paper, were entirely above board. Sinatra knew who Marchetti was. Everyone knew. You didn't operate in Las Vegas without understanding the landscape, without recognizing the architecture of power that made the city function. You didn't perform at the Sands, the Flamingo, or the Copacabana without recognizing the names that appeared on construction contracts and union rosters. It was part of the ecosystem, part of the reality of working in entertainment in cities where entertainment and other interests overlapped in ways that were never discussed in public, but were understood by everyone who needed to understand them. Sinatra had performed at venues Marchetti had invested in. They had shaken hands at charity events where Marchetti's name appeared on the donor list. They had shared tables at benefits where powerful men gathered to be photographed looking generous. They had exchanged pleasantries in backstage areas and private dining rooms. But they weren't friends. Friendship implied intimacy, shared confidences, trust that came from history. They were colleagues in a city built on unspoken rules. Sinatra sang, Marchetti facilitated. Their worlds intersected at certain points, and at those points both men were professional and respectful, and as long as everyone stayed in their lane, things remained civil. This invitation felt different. The third request carried weight the first 2 hadn't. Declining a third time would send a message Sinatra wasn't ready to send, so he came. Not because he was obligated, but because he understood the language of respect. The gathering was small, 15 people, casino executives from the Sands, a lawyer from Los Angeles who specialized in entertainment contracts, 2 men from Teamsters Local 560 in New Jersey, their handshakes firm in a way that suggested different kinds of negotiations, others whose exact roles were unclear, but whose presence suggested influence. The atmosphere was cordial but careful. This was a room full of people who understood hierarchies. Conversations happened in pairs, voices stayed low. Everyone was waiting for something, though no one said it out loud. Sinatra had arrived at 8:30, fashionably late but not disrespectfully so. Charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, thin black tie, pockets square, folded with precision. He looked like a man who understood that image was armor. Marchetti had greeted him personally, firm handshake, warm smile. "Frank, thank you for coming. I know you're busy." Sinatra nodded, returned the smile with something cooler, and stepped inside. For the first hour, nothing happened. Sinatra nursed a Jack Daniels on the rocks, smoked cigarettes, made small talk with a casino manager from the dunes about upcoming headliners. He spoke briefly with the lawyer about a property dispute in Beverly Hills. He was polite, professional, present but not engaged. Marchetti was in his late 50s, thick in the chest, with silver hair combed straight back. His suit was expensive but not flashy. Dark navy, Italian cut, with cufflinks that caught the light. He wore a gold watch that looked understated until you recognized the brand. Everything about him was calibrated, controlled. When he spoke, people listened, not because he raised his voice, but because not listening had consequences. Around 9:30, Marchetti stood near the stone fireplace and tapped his glass with a ring. The sound was soft but precise. The room quieted immediately, instantly. "Gentlemen," Marchetti began, his voice warm but firm, "I appreciate you being here tonight. I won't keep you long. I know everyone's got places to be, but I wanted to gather a few friends, a few people I respect, to share something that matters to me." He paused, letting his eyes sweep the room, making contact with a few key faces, acknowledging them individually without saying their names. "You all know my daughter, Angela. Some of you have known her since she was a kid, watched her grow up. She's getting married in June. Beautiful girl, smart, kind, marrying a good kid from a good family in Winnetka. Doctor's son, stable, good values. I couldn't be happier for her, couldn't be prouder." A few nods around the room. Polite congratulations murmured from different corners. Someone said Mazel Tov. Marchetti acknowledged them with a slight tilt of his head. "The wedding's going to be at the country club in Evanston," Marchetti continued. "Sunset Ridge. We're doing it right. 300 guests. Sit-down dinner, full orchestra. Angela deserves the best. I want it to be perfect, something she remembers for the rest of her life." He took a sip from his glass, letting the moment breathe. Then his tone shifted, just slightly. "So here's what I'm thinking," Marchetti said. "I want to make it special, something extraordinary, and I want Frank to perform." He gestured toward Sinatra with his glass. 15 pairs of eyes followed the motion. "Not a full show," Marchetti clarified. "Just a few songs during the reception. The way you look tonight, maybe all the way. Something classy for the first dance. Angela grew up listening to your records. Your voice was playing in our house from the time she was a little girl. It would mean the world to her. It would mean everything to me." He said it like he was making a request, but the phrasing was careful. Not "I'm asking," not "would you consider," just "I want." The difference was subtle but understood by everyone in the room. Sinatra was standing near the bar, a drink in his hand, a cigarette burning in the crystal ashtray beside him. He didn't move, didn't react. His face was composed, neutral. Marchetti turned toward him, still smiling. "Frank, you'd make an old man very happy. And Angela, she'd remember it for the rest of her life." The room was silent. Every eye shifted to Sinatra. This was the moment, the reason everyone had been invited. Sinatra took a slow sip of his drink, placed it down with barely a sound, picked up his cigarette, took a single drag, and let the smoke drift upward. 3 seconds passed, then 5, then 7. Long enough that men shifted their weight, long enough that someone cleared their throat. Then Sinatra looked at Marchetti, not with anger, not with defiance, just a calm, steady gaze that lasted 3 seconds longer than was comfortable. When Sinatra spoke, his voice was quiet, even, no edge, no heat, just absolute clarity. "Carlo," he said, "I don't perform at weddings." 5 words, delivered without apology, without explanation, just a statement of fact, the kind of line that left no room for negotiation. Marchetti's smile didn't falter immediately, but something shifted in his posture, a slight stiffening in the shoulders. He let out a soft chuckle, meant to ease tension. The tension didn't ease. "Frank, come on," Marchetti said, his tone still friendly but with new weight underneath. "It's my daughter. It's one afternoon, 3, maybe 4 songs. I'm not asking you to work for free. Name your price. Whatever you want. 10,000, 20, whatever feels right. Or we make it a donation to whatever charity you want. I just want Angela to have this." Sinatra didn't break eye contact, didn't move, just let the silence sit there, heavy and thick. "It's not about money," Sinatra said. His voice was still calm, still measured, but now there was something underneath it, something that made it clear this conversation was over. One of the men near the window shifted his weight. Another became very interested in the ice in his glass. The lawyer looked down at his shoes. Everyone understood what was happening. Marchetti had just made an offer, and Sinatra had just refused it. In front of 15 witnesses, Marchetti's jaw tightened. For a brief moment, the smile disappeared entirely. His eyes narrowed, searching Sinatra's face for hesitation, for a crack, for anything that suggested this was negotiable. He found nothing. "You sure about that, Frank?" Marchetti asked. The friendliness was gone now. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sinatra picked up his drink, took another sip, set it down again with the same deliberate softness. When he spoke, his voice was softer, almost conversational, but every word landed with finality. "I sing where I choose to sing," Sinatra said. "When I choose to sing. That's how it works for me. That's how it's always worked." He reached into his jacket, pulled out his car keys, and placed a hand briefly on the bar. Then he looked at Marchetti one last time. His expression was calm, almost kind, but there was steel underneath. "Carlo," Sinatra said quietly, "I wish Angela nothing but happiness. I hope the wedding is everything you want it to be. I mean that, but I won't be there." And then Sinatra walked toward the door, not quickly, not slowly, just at the pace of a man who had said what he needed to say and had nothing left to add. His footsteps were soft on the polished floor. He didn't look back, didn't hesitate. No one stopped him. No one spoke. Marchetti stood by the fireplace, watching Sinatra cross the room and step out into the night. The sound of the door closing was soft, but in that silence, it echoed. For a long moment, No one moved. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. Before, the quiet had been tense, charged. Now it was heavy, uncomfortable, the kind of silence that makes men avoid eye contact. Then one of the union men muttered something about needing to get back to the hotel, about an early flight tomorrow. He set his drink down, nodded respectfully toward Marchetti, and made his way to the door. Another man followed 30 seconds later, making a similar excuse. Within 10 minutes, half the room had emptied. Polite goodbyes, handshakes, thanks for the hospitality, men shaking Marchetti's hand, while their eyes said something else entirely. The gathering dissolved like smoke. Marchetti stood perfectly still, staring at the closed door. He lifted his glass, took a slow sip, and then set it down on the mantel with more force than necessary. Not a slam, just enough that the sound made everyone flinch. What Marchetti understood, even if he didn't like it, was that Sinatra had drawn a line, not with threats, not with anger, just with the simple assertion that he could not be bought, pressured, or obligated, even by men who were used to getting what they wanted. 3 weeks later, Angela Marchetti's wedding took place at the Sunset Ridge Country Club in Evanston. The weather was perfect. The flowers were stunning. A 12-piece orchestra played standards for 4 hours. The food was exceptional. Everything was exactly as Marchetti had promised. Perfect. Memorable. The first dance was to The Way You Look Tonight, performed by a professional singer flown in from New York. Talented, smooth voice. Well-rehearsed, perfectly competent, but it wasn't Sinatra. No one mentioned Sinatra's name. Angela never learned that her father had tried. She had a beautiful wedding. She married a good man. She was happy. But among a certain circle of people, men who worked in Las Vegas, Atlantic City, and Miami, men who understood the unspoken rules of influence and obligation, the story spread. Quietly, carefully, never written down, just passed along in private conversations, in back rooms where business was discussed, in the kinds of places where stories like this mattered. The night Sinatra walked out of Carlo Marchetti's house in Palm Springs. The night he said no to a man who wasn't used to hearing it. The night he made it clear that his voice, his talent, his presence belonged to him and no one else. And in the years that followed, whenever someone asked Sinatra to perform as a favor, as an obligation, as something owed, the answer was always the same, calm, measured, absolute. I sing where I choose to sing. That was the rule. And after Palm Springs, everyone understood it. Not because Sinatra had made threats or burned bridges, but because he'd done something simpler. He'd said no, quietly, clearly, without apology. He had drawn a line and refused to cross it, even when crossing it would have been easier. In a world where almost everything was negotiable, where power was measured by leverage and obligation, Sinatra had reminded everyone that some things couldn't be bought, some people couldn't be owned, and some lines, once drawn, would never be crossed. Not for money, not for friendship, not even for men who were used to getting what they wanted. That was Frank Sinatra, not the legend, not the myth, just the man who understood that the moment you let someone else decide where you sing, you've already lost something you can never get back.